Well, it's been a couple of years since Jimmy Buffett passed, and that Margaritaville franchise is still going strong. But there's actually a battle that's actually been kind of creeping up and escalating over his estate. No surprise. It's a big one, 275 million. We'll go inside the dispute, kind of give you some insight into what's happening, and we'll let Nick weigh in on what he thinks will be the outcome. Welcome in. Glad to have you on the show once more, Nick. I like this episode because I was a Buffett fan. I don't know if you were as well, but it's no surprise. Every couple of years we have one of these big estates, the big celebrity estates, kind of pop up and have a little drama.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess vicariously through my parents growing up, because they were big Buffett fans. So they listened to it, both on. But we had a lot of the old records, and then we had the big stereo system and receiver. I don't know if you remember those.
Oh yeah.
And for our young watchers or listeners, these wireless and Bluetooth speakers, you don't know how hard it used to be. But my parents had a big, it was a whole cabinet, right? With the receiver and then the tape player that could do 2 cassettes. So you could load 2 of them in, and then you got the disc changer,
right,
where the CD slot would come out spinning, and it was 5 discs you could put in there, and then it would put all over. But yeah, we used to listen to, they're big Jimmy Buffett fans. And, we would go to the beach every year on vacation. We'd go to Outer Banks. And so on the 11-hour car ride each way, my parents would get like the soft case with all the cassette tapes, and they'd have every Jimmy Buffett album on cassette tape. And when we crossed into North Carolina, for the last few hours of the trip, especially when we got onto the island, they'd immediately just flip in Jimmy Buffett, and we're there, we're close, we're pumped. So yeah, Jimmy Buffett, has a special place in my heart. Now, I've never seen him live. I've never been to a Jimmy Buffett concert. Although there's a place right across the river between Ohio and Kentucky, known as Riverbend, one of the big concert venues there. And growing up, our house was so close, and we were in Kentucky side, but you could hear the sound from Riverbend. So there were times we'd sit on the front porch, and if we knew that Jimmy Buffett was playing, the time he came to town every year, we could sit on the front porch and hear a little bit of it. So yeah, cool. It certainly brings back some memories. And then as you become an adult, some of the references that didn't make sense when you were a kid all of a sudden make sense. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what Jimmy Buffett and the Coral Reefer Band. I didn't know that, I didn't know what that was. But yeah, no, it brings back memories. And apparently there's been some issues specifically with, kind of what the arrangements were to take care of his wife. And then, unfortunately, his wife and the person who was put in charge to help take care of her are butting heads. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's been 2 years now. 275 million is the estate value, and yeah, this fight is kind of ramped up a little bit. I haven't seen it as much in the news. Maybe I just have avoided it. There's been other headlines. There's a lot going on, I guess, where this maybe kind of falls to the back burner a little bit. But I know with a lot of these celebrities, this becomes headline news because the money's so big, the person's so significant, and the battle. Everybody loves a little bit of drama, so it's always fun to kind of get into these. We've done this in the past too. So go back. We've gone through a number of celebrity estates that had some disputes and kind of talk through those as well. But today we're going to talk through Jimmy Buffett's. And again, if you have any questions for Nick, we always appreciate hearing from you. You can leave a comment down below the video if you're watching this on YouTube. Subscribe while you're here as well if you haven't done that. But also go to CincinnatiEstatePlan.com. You can schedule a time to talk with Nick. I don't know if you have questions about Jimmy Buffett you want to discuss, but more so getting your own affairs in order so that you don't have these disputes down the road. So let's jump into this, Nick, because there's a lot to kind of unpack here, and
Yeah.
I know for people that aren't familiar at all on what's actually happening, this will be a kind of a good way to start the conversation before we dig into what you think.
Yeah. So here's the deal. And one of the reasons that we have not, because I guess this has been brewing for a little while, and why this has only recently made news, right? Is because because basically what was set up is, Buffett, Jimmy Buffett had things set up to where once he passed away, the majority, I don't know the exact percentage, but he had a lot of money set aside that was moved into what's known as a marital trust. And that's, that can be the technical phrase for it. But basically, it's, hey, when I pass away, the money that I set aside for my spouse and to take care of her, is a marital trust. So basically what happens is, he said, when I pass away, set aside money for my wife, and for the rest of her life to take care of her. And then when she passes away, everything else goes to the kids. They had 3 kids together, so you don't have any worries with that about, they're not, she's the step parent, or, she's trying to siphon the money for her kids. Like, none of that drama. This should be very straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it should be all for her. So one of the things that he did is set up a co-trustee. So Jane, his wife, is not responsible for handling everything on her own, which may sound a little bit harsh, but when you think about his money, investments, intellectual property, the right to all of his music, royalties, the whole Margaritaville, I guess, restaurant franchise and brand, then you realize that it makes sense to have someone to help out, because, I personally, I wouldn't know how to deal with, negotiating with Warner Brothers or a movie studio about a deal to use my music in a movie. I wouldn't know the first thing about that.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was they set it up to say, Jimmy said, when I pass away, my wife and his name's Richard Mosenter, I believe, unless I'm pronouncing that wrong, are going to be doing this together as co-trustees. And this guy, I guess, was the accountant, kind of the business manager, the numbers guy for Jimmy Buffett. I guess he knew him for over 30 years. So they're going to be handling things together. So when you think about it, you say, wow, sounds like a really great idea. Something happens, my wife is taken care of, and the person who knows all the inner workings, how to deal with all of this, is going to be a co-trustee to help manage things, right? So when you think about it, it says that sounds like the perfect thing to do, the perfect person to help, and you're not leaving someone high and dry. And again, this is no insult to Jane. My guess is there's a reason they hired this guy a long time ago. My guess is, Jimmy Buffett wanted the help as well. So in theory, it's a great idea. And now we'll get into, the fun part. This is something that actually was done earlier this month. We're recording this at the end of June, by the way. Now, Jane, the wife, and Richard, the business manager, co-trustee, are butting heads. And now they're fighting with each other. So all of a sudden, we have trouble in paradise. Okay, so that's
Well played.
That's where it started, and now those two are at each other's throats.
Well, it's interesting. It's on the surface when you break it down and kind of explain it. It seems like a pretty normal setup, right? With 2 people that are very close to Jimmy, kind of sharing some of those responsibilities. So, are you surprised as kind of we get into the petitions that were filed? Are you surprised it has gotten to this point?
There's not a lot that surprises me anymore.
I guess when there's this much money involved too.
Well,
things happen.
yes, and then so at first you would think, surely they had a relationship forever, and you would hope there's no fighting. So now they're fighting, but it's always fighting over money. And then when you hear some of the accusations, what they are saying the other party is doing, then it makes sense. So if it's something where this was actually happening, then absolutely would have to do it.
Okay.
So they both filed petitions in the beginning of June to fire each other. Okay, so the business manager filed something to remove Jane as a co-trustee, and Jane, the wife, filed trying to get the business manager removed as a co-trustee. The business manager, filed to remove Jane as a co-trustee, and he's basically saying that she's harming things, she's making it worse, she's getting in the way. She's not carrying out her duties, and she's basically handcuffing him and his ability to get things done. And, his claims on that were, hey, Jimmy Buffett intentionally set it up this way to not give her sole authority. And he's trying to say the whole purpose of this was for me to handle things, me to help her out, and her not to be in charge and not to put this burden on her. And she's just messing it up. She's not doing what she's supposed to do. She's dropping the balls. She's getting in the way. So the very next day, she files a petition to fire him. And she says he's withholding information. She's overcharging the estate as far as the fees. She's saying he's hostile. She's condescending. He's condescending. He's not sharing information. He's hiding income from her, and also, not disclosing the proper amount of income. So, I from what I understand, she's supposed to be receiving the income on a regular basis from the estate, and then if anything additional is needed, she can get that as well. And she said that he charged, in 2024, he charged 1.7, almost $2 million in fees. He's not managing the income of the trust. So he's saying she doesn't know what she's doing. She's getting in the way. She's not handling things. She's dropping the ball. And she's saying he's being hostile. He's not telling her what's going on. He's getting in the way. He's hiding things from her. He's lying about income, and he's charging too much. And these lawsuits were filed in Florida and in California. So right now they're arguing over who has jurisdiction even to settle and hear the matter. And I don't know specifically the reason for that. I'm not saying I'm a civil court expert. But one of the things that they're fighting over is this going to be heard in Florida, or is this going to be heard in California? So obviously they're both saying fire the other person, let me be in charge. And they're also fighting over what court they're going to be in. So that's where we're at. And obviously, Ben, to get back to your earlier question, when you hear the accusations, it makes total sense. If I was in charge of $275 million and I had to have a co-signer, and I thought that co-signer was screwing things up, slowing things down, and harming my ability to do my job, because look, I'm on the hook for managing $275 million. I need to be really careful and not screw that up. Then I understand why he's saying, let me do this job alone, get her out of my way. I get that. Now, if she's saying, you're not telling me information, you're keeping my money from me, and you're lying about it, and it's my money, I also understand why she did what she did, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. And then 1.7 million for fees for a year seems high. I've nothing to compare that to, but it seems like quite a bit. I can see where frustration is there. So some of these issues that they're kind of getting into and they're arguing about, Nick, take us into that. Like, what are some of the core issues that they're fighting over?
Yeah. So first off, obviously one of them is the fees. And I will tell you, at least in Ohio, and this is somewhat accepted, but I guess it's a good ballpark or starting point, but not a hard, fast rule. but a lot of times what is considered appropriate for a trustee fee is 1% of the value of the estate per year, maybe with a little bit of flex, maybe 0.75% up to 1.25%, 1.5% per year.
Okay.
And they base that, because they look at what the market rate is. And the way you do that is you look at what these corporate trustees would charge. So Fidelity, Schwab, whomever. And by the way, Fidelity, we're still waiting on a sponsorship deal. So if anyone from Fidelity's trust department there in Covington, Kentucky, is listening, and you got some sponsorship money, send it my way. So that offer's still on the table. But when you think about it, $1.7 million is a lot. But when you're talking about being responsible for $275 million, and not even just money, like you have a whole restaurant and franchise brand that you're dealing with, and you have all of his music, all the records that are sold, all the T-shirts, everything like that. When you think about that, he's basically the CEO of multiple companies here. Again, you see it, Ben, on its surface when you're saying, hey, I'm giving away almost $2 million for someone to babysit my money. From that perspective, it's obnoxious. But to be honest with you, Ben, I don't know that I would accept all of that responsibility for, only $1.7 million a year, trying to deal with all those moving pieces. If it was just money in an investment account and I could keep it all in front of me, hire an advisor and a tax guy and be done, maybe. But to run all these businesses and restaurants and, music and intellectual property, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I understand where she's coming from, but I do not believe that if he's really handling all of this, I personally don't think he's overcharging. Okay. If that gives it any perspective.
Yeah, it does.
So I think that's something, she's not happy about, but is probably not appropriate. Now, the things that I think are appropriate concerns, she's supposed to be getting the income, and she is saying that out of $275 million, the whole estate is producing less than $2 million a year in income.
That's crazy.
Which either is wrong or is being obnoxiously mismanaged.
Right.
And she's saying that, one, that's not enough income. Either you're hiding it and lying about it, or you're doing something wrong if that's all you're getting out of $275 million. Shoot, I can put it in savings bonds, Ben, and make more than that, right?
Yeah.
And she's saying that amount is insufficient, to maintain her lifestyle. So she's saying she's not getting enough money a year. Less than $2 million is not enough a year to take care of her. And she's saying that there's no way it's only making this amount of money. And she's also, has said the whole time that she's not getting all the information. She's not receiving information. And one of the things she put in one of the filings is she said she's received little to no financial disclosures for over a year now. She's been held in the dark, which if that's the case, that's not allowed. That's not appropriate. That's where you're at. And my guess is they're probably not happy with each other, and it's turning into a personal fight. Although, the business manager is saying, this is the way it was supposed to be. He's arguing that Jimmy Buffett set it up specifically for him to be able to control it. And he specifically did it to limit her control because it wasn't in her wheelhouse, and to keep her from screwing it up. Again, not intentionally, but, mismanaging it. Or trying to deal with something that's not, specifically in her wheelhouse. So obviously they have, mismatched expectations. She's thinking she was supposed to be getting way more out of this, have way more information, way more control, and get way more money. And, the business manager is saying, I was hired to take care of this for her because it's in my wheelhouse and not hers. So are you surprised now, knowing what's been going on, that neither one of them are happy and they're just going at each other's throats?
Well, it's very early. Obviously, this was just
Yeah.
filed this month, so I know it'll take some time to kind of figure everything out. But kind of take us in before we kind of take away some lessons, because I know that's kind of the reason we want to discuss it, is we can talk about and apply this to what you're doing with your own financial, with your own estate plan and your own finances, to figure out, hey, what are some lessons I can learn, maybe even on a smaller scale, obviously. But why does this battle and this whole dispute matter? And what do you think will end up being the outcome? Because it's interesting, kind of looking at these two parties and with this situation, they both obviously have a say here, and obviously Jimmy's wishes were to have them both involved. So how do you think it plays out?
Yeah, so obviously you hit the nail on the head. A lot of times judges will look at what was the trust maker's intent. Trust maker's intent was his wife and the business manager to work together in harmony. That's the one outcome we know that will not happen. So, but it's probably, and again, who knows, but it's probably damage beyond repair at this point. So a couple things to pick up here. Obviously, I'm not saying it's always a bad idea, but be very, very careful about naming co-executors or co-trustees to do the job as a team. This, talks about why. Especially when you have someone for whom the money is theirs, managing their own money, and someone who it's not their money, but it's like an advisor or a professional, and not just from an advisory role, but from a trustee or a management role. And I think a lot of times, if you just say, hey, when I pass away, this guy's in charge, you're not, at least everyone understands, where their role is in this point. It's, hey, I'm not in charge. He takes care of it for me. But when you have co-trustees and both of them think they're in charge, but you need to understand that in most instances, when you have two people, they have to act in unison. This is not a situation of divide and conquer. And if there's two people here, I can take half of the work and you can take half the work and we can make it easier. Okay, so I'm not saying, Ben, that co-trustees are always a bad idea, but there's good and bad reasons to do it. So you got to be very careful about that. And then also, I think the other thing, one, communication is important, and not knowing what's going on, not having information, whether there's, whether anyone's stealing or not. If the wife's accusations, I guess, that he's not telling me what's going on with my own money are true, then what are you doing? Right? Of course, of course you're going to have this happen. If you're supposed to be giving me information on my own money and you won't, Ben, I am automatically going to assume something's wrong.
Right.
Right? I never understand people withholding information. It's her money. She's a co-trustee. The law on does she have a right to information is very clear. There's no valid excuse for I don't have to tell you what's going on. So I don't understand that at all. Now, this is early, Ben. And guys, for our listeners, this is like less than 3 weeks after the lawsuits were filed. So who knows? By the time this comes out, on YouTube and on our podcast, it may very well be all this information has since come out, to give more context. So, we're obviously hitting this pretty early.
Yeah.
But I don't understand I'm withholding information. If that's true, that doesn't make sense. And then I will also say this, and again, maybe the documents will be disclosed and we have a chance to look at them, but you need conflict resolution. You need some sort of protocols for what to do if there's an issue, what to do if there's a fight, how it gets resolved, or do you have like a referee or a neutral third party who can resolve disputes? And you have to be extra careful with that when you have co-trustees, okay? Because if you only have one trustee, unless they have split personalities,
Hmm.
if I'm in charge, I'm not going to argue with myself. But if you have two trustees and they disagree, and again, we'll see. Hopefully there's provisions in here, but also, Ben, time and time again, most of these celebrity issues we've talked about have always been shocking, how either nothing was done or something was not updated or something was done very sloppily.
Mm-hmm.
So this can certainly happen to anyone. But yeah, obviously be careful about co-trustees and make sure that your estate plan has very good conflict resolution referee provisions. And that's extremely important when you have co-trustees. And at this point, again, I don't know what the conflict resolution procedures in the document are, because obviously that would be something the judge will look at. But you may end up in a situation where the court will remove both of them and appoint a neutral third party at this point. A lot of trusts, a lot of documents will have provisions where, if the trustees get fired or removed for cause, and then they will specifically say that a corporate trustee is the only type of trustee that can be put in secondarily. And the reason they do that sort of protection is to prevent people from gaming the system. So, Ben, if you and I are brothers, we're co-trustees, we're not getting along, or if it's just me even, you don't want a provision where I say, all right, well, I'm getting removed, but I'm going to appoint my best friend to be trustee because I know he'll pay me out and side with me. So a lot of times the provisions, and this is hopefully the case here, where it says, hey, if you guys can't get along, if all the trustees get fired or removed, then a new trustee has to be appointed, right? You can't have no one doing the job, but a lot of times it'll say it must be a financial institution, a trust company, because they have SEC requirements. They have to do everything by the book. So my guess is that's where this is going. But again, obviously the case is very early. So
yeah.
that's the other thing to keep in mind here. And again, obviously, not everyone runs into the same circumstances, but a couple things just to keep in mind. If you are comfortable with it, the less surprises, the better. Okay. If there is a reason to have someone not be in charge of their money or someone else help them with the money, it's a good idea to bring that up ahead of time. It's a good idea to say, here's what their job is. Here's how they are helping you. Also have the bailout clauses, the fire escape. So if you don't do your job, here's how that gets fixed. Because you can't give someone just blanket authority like a king to where even if they screw around, no one can call them on it. I'm obviously going to tell you, don't hide or don't hide information because there's no point.
Right.
And so if that's truly the case, I think that's garbage. I think that's indefensible. Again, they're in the firing accusations at each other phase. Okay, so it may all come out that's half of this is exaggerated, but I don't ever, and I never tell executors or trustees to keep the family or beneficiaries in the dark. You can't. They're entitled to the information. And what ends up happening, Ben, is I will have people who have done nothing wrong. They haven't stolen, they haven't mismanaged the money. But because they're keeping people in the dark, because they're not answering questions, they're not giving information that they're required to give, people get suspicious. And I don't think that's unreasonable. If I say, hey, Ben, you're in charge of my money. I have a right to this information. Why won't you give it to me? Of course, the only logical response is he's hiding something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether you are or not, I've had a lot of situations where people have done nothing wrong, but because they wouldn't tell people what's going on or didn't share all the information, they got accused of wrongdoing. Okay. So just be careful with all of that. And I would say also, kind of going back to, what I mentioned before, if you're going to have co-trustees, be very careful about who they are. And I always say you don't have to be best friends, but they need to be able to work together. You don't want mortal enemies. You don't want people who are butting heads.
Well, good breakdown, Nick, for sure. There's a lot going on. It just on the surface, like to me, it just feels like the wife would win out in most of these arguments. It just feels like they should have more control, more power. But I guess with the way this was set up, it's equal.
Yeah, so that's in situations where, there's not businesses, intellectual copyright, franchise restaurants all across the country, music rights. I think that's more common. I will say it is not extremely common to say when one spouse dies, the other spouse needs to hire a babysitter. That is not common in most instances. But in a situation like this, with all of that, like Ben, I'll tell you, if my wife had, owned Margaritaville and was a famous singer, the minute she passed away, even if the estate plan said I'm in charge of everything, I would immediately hire professionals to help me out because I know better. I know that I can't manage that. Mm-hmm. And I've had people say many times where they say, hey, I handle this. My husband or wife doesn't. If something happens to me, I want to make sure she has help. So that's not unreasonable, but we need to have very specific and sometimes harsh conversations about what that looks like. And then the attorney should be asking, well, what if the person you are asking to help out, your wife, disagrees with what your wife wants? Who wins? Okay, we need to have that discussion. And I don't know if that's happened yet. Obviously, that ship has sailed. So we'll see how it breaks out in court. Now, obviously, Ben, this is uncommon. Like I said, to say when one spouse passes away, the other one has a babysitter. And I don't mean that in derogatory, but someone else to kind of co-manage things. Just be extra careful if you're doing it, is all I'm saying. There are good reasons and bad reasons to do it. Just be careful about it. Make sure everyone's on the same page and pick the right person who can be a support as opposed to someone who becomes an enemy.
Well said. All right. We'll leave it on that note. Again, you can learn more. Search it. We'll kind of follow this. Maybe when there's an outcome, we might follow up with another episode. But this is a good breakdown of Jimmy Buffett's estate and what the dispute is currently right now over that $275 million valuation and everything that's inside of that, because it's a big one. It's a popular one as well. And you got to imagine it's a brand that's going to be around for a long time. So want to get this right.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Nick, thanks as always. If you have questions for us, please, CincinnatiEstatePlan.com. That is the website. Also, leave a comment down on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you wherever you're watching from. I know we have people not only in Ohio, but all around the country that check out the podcast. We appreciate your support as well. And as always, if you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe to us on YouTube. We'd appreciate that support as well. All right, Nick, have a good week. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by estate planning? The process can seem complex, but it doesn't have to be. The Rosenbauer Law Office is dedicated to helping you protect what matters most: your family, your assets, and your peace of mind. Nick and the team will guide you through every step of the process, making sure you feel confident and informed along the way. Take the first step toward peace of mind today. Schedule an introductory call by clicking the link in the description of today's show.
This show is for informational purposes only and does not provide any legal advice. Information on this show may not constitute the most up-to-date legal information. Please do not act or refrain from acting based solely on anything you hear on this show. This show does not form any attorney-client relationship with the Rosenbauer Law Office, LLC. Please seek the counsel of a qualified attorney before addressing your own estate planning needs.